Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. In today's video, I am talking about different ways to use layering stamps. Of course, I love using layering stamps with different colors of inks, but that's not the only way you can use them. So today I'm going to share several other techniques to use with your layering stamps, even if you don't have tons of colors of inks. But first, let's just go over the basic technique of using different ink colors with your layering stamps. So I'm just going to offer my favorite tips and tricks for stamp layering here. First is to use a stamp positioner like the Misty. The second is to find easy layering stamps like the Stamp Market's jumbo layered Lovely stamp is basically 2 layers and then the flower centers if you want to use them. I also recommend using colors that are sort of far away as far as how light and dark they are. That makes the stamp layering easier to see. So you don't really need lots of colors, but it's nice to have some that are far apart. For large stamps, I like to use the Stamper's Secret. Mine is the Debbie tool. There'll be a coupon code down in the YouTube description box below the video for the next 2 weeks. So check that out if you want to get 10% off. In between stamping layers, I like to heat set them, especially when you're using dye inks. Dye inks sink into the paper. So if you stamp one and it's sinking into the paper and you stamp the other, they're sinking into the paper at the same time and you can end up with just a mush. Sometimes it's nice to have them blended, but you really do want to see the layers, then I recommend heat setting in between. And again, like I said, the Stamp Market's jumbo layered Lovely stamp set is really easy. Even the leaves are just 2 stamps, so you only need technically 2 colors. I'm going to do something with these a little bit different. That's another tip. If you like to make a more watercolor or blended look, I'll show you how to do that with 3 colors of ink. So I am using greenery on the second stamp here. Again, these are very easy to line up, and I do like to double stamp to just really make sure I get a nice crisp impression and make sure the entire stamp has been stamped. Okay, so my trick is to use the first layer of a color like citrine, which is kind of a yellowish green, and I'm going to double stamp it to make sure that you can really see a nice crisp impression there. Then I'm going to take another color. This is, I believe, cactus. Yep. And I'm just going to put it on the tips of the leaves, and then I'm going to take my finger and just soften out that color so that when I stamp it, it gives it almost a watercolor look to it. It's just a fun way to use layering stamps and to add some extra colors if you do have them, if you have all of those ink pad colors to really start to play with. Of course, I am stamping on a really good white cardstock. It is Nina Solar White and 110 pound, so that I'm making sure that I'm really taking advantage of all these ink colors that we are using to stamp these out. So this is sort of the typical or traditional way to do ink layering to create these images. Once I have those done, I am going to just die cut them out with the coordinating dies using some purple tape to hold them in place. You may remember this panel die from the Stamp Market. I still absolutely love it. I think it is such a delicate, pretty look to it. And I am using the Thermoweb Ultra Bond in the pen. Makes it really easy to get around all those little spots. Then I'm going to take my die cut flowers and leaves, and I'm going to pop some of them up. I'm going to put those smaller leaves with the Ultra Bond liquid adhesive flat down to the card so that there's different layers of dimension on this flower and its leaves, and just tuck it right behind the petals there so that it can sit fully on that card. And then I had die cut the 2 layers of the Happiest Hi and Hello dies, and I'm going to pop those up right on top of the flower. The last thing I'm going to do is add some enamel dots to the center of the flower. If you just use the stamp set, you can stamp the center of the flower. If you use the dies to cut it out, it does cut out that flower center. So you could stamp it and then pop it back in there if you desire, but I like to add those enamel dots and pop up the flower as well. Now let's try a couple of different ways to use those layering stamps without a ton of different ink colors. So another way to use layering stamps without a ton of ink colors is to create a one layer stamped background. So these are the layered Lovelies stamp set from the stamp market, and you can see that one of the layers of some of the flowers, it's clear exactly what the flower is without stamping the second layer. So I am going to use one of these flowers and stamp it multiple times on an A2 piece of white cardstock to create a background. Then I'm going to grab one of the little leaf vines as well and fill in some of those open spaces in between the flowers. And I'm going to grab one more color of ink and stamp. I'm actually using one of the large flower centers, but it's just got these pretty little dots. And I thought that that created a really nice background that's totally different than layering up the stamps with 3 or 2 colors of ink per flower and leaf. I've stamped a greeting and I've die cut the scallop circles frames dies in the citrine, which is also the color I used on the leaves. And then I'm going to pop up that die cut sentiment that says hello friend. Really just a fun way to use layering stamps without having to do any layering at all. Last but not least, I added a few more enamel dots as accents because I love this color on top of the citrine and it just adds some dimension and shine too. Okay, so the next way to use the layering stamps without lots of ink colors is to die cut the flowers out of white cardstock. So again, I'm using the layered Lovelies stamp set, and this time we're also using the coordinating dies. So I cut those flowers out of white cardstock, and now I'm just going to stamp the detail layer. So last time we used the filled layer for the background that we stamped. This time I'm just using the detailed layer to add a detail to the center of the flowers, and this means that it's a white flower with a pretty colorful center. So there are definitely flowers out there like that in the wild, so I felt like it was okay to do here as well. So once I had them all stamped out, the colors that I chose were so vibrant that I felt like the white needed just a hint of something lighter. So I took the blush pink ink and I'm using a domed foam blender from Tim Holtz to just blend on a little bit of that blush pink so that it still is like a white-ish flower, but it's got that nice blush towards especially the edges a little bit darker, and that ink blending just looks so pretty with the flower centers really vibrant on top. So I stamped a thanks sentiment in the middle of some white cardstock, and then I'm going to pop up these flowers around the outside, and once I get them all adhered, I am going to just place this down on an A2 piece of blush cardstock. So I love that the Stamp Market has coordinating inks and cardstocks, and then I'm just going to use those enamel dots to add flower centers to all of the flowers, and then just put a few around the outside as well, just for some extra shine and dimension and embellishment to this very simple card otherwise. And I just love using layering stamps in all these different ways. For the next one, we're actually going to use white heat embossing on colorful cardstock. So this time I'm using the Blooms and Buds layering stamp set from the Stamp Market. Again, it's just a couple of layers. So I'm going to take the detailed layers this time, and I'm going to pick out ones that I know will be easy to see that they are flowers after we die cut the colorful cardstock. So I am stamping the detailed layer on several different colors of Stamp Market cardstock with their embossing ink, and then I'm pouring white embossing powder on top, and then I'm going to heat set that. And you can see how pretty the white looks on these different colors of cardstock once the white embossing powder is heat set, and that when we die cut them out, there will be both the white details and the color of the cardstock as well. I also did stamp and heat emboss some leaves and stems, and I white heat embossed those as well. Then I'm going to find all of the coordinating dies, line them up around the images. It's still pretty easy to line up even though we didn't stamp the fill layer. So really no problem there, even on ones that looked a little more complicated. So I stamped the sentiment on some white cardstock and matted it on some colorful cardstock as well. And then I'm just going to use some tape runner to adhere the stems and the flowers right to this card. I love the way that the white heat embossing looks on this colorful cardstock and how easy this is. I think everybody has white embossing powder and an embossing ink, so this is a really great way to stretch your layering stamp supplies with those other embossing powder supplies. For this card, we're going to take advantage of the fact that the stamp market has inks and cardstocks that match. So we're going to stamp a layer of the flower in the same color as the cardstock. Both the ink and the cardstock are blush, and what's really nice is that it obviously coordinates really well, but it also, especially if you double and triple stamp it, it has a slightly darker look to it. So, you're not stamping on white cardstock, you're stamping on a colorful cardstock, which is giving you a different look in the background. And then because the ink is the same color as the cardstock, it just makes it a whole different look to your stamped image rather than just stamping on white with different layers and different colors of ink. So again, the nice thing about this jumbo layered lovely stamp is that you really only need 2 colors of ink for the flower and the flower details. And then there are 2 different flower centers that you can use. And I did stamp those in 2 different colors, but obviously you could use some of the same colors that you used for either the background fill layer or the detail layer of the flower. I really cut this down kind of slim and then put it on an A2 piece of white cardstock. And then I'm going to stamp the stopping by to say at the top in black. And then I think I used Hey There at the bottom. Yeah, Hey There in the black Stamp Market ink at the bottom. Just a really clean and simple card. So easy to put together. And it's just one of those ways where you take advantage of some of those supplies that you have if you happen to have cardstock and matching ink. I hope that today's video helps you look at your layering stamps a little bit differently and maybe pull them out a little bit more often. If you want to see more about layering stamps, check out this video over here. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon.